Welcome to Ask the Educator, a podcast brought to you by Healthmark Industries. Are you a sterile processing technician or manager? Maybe you work in infection prevention or biomedical engineering. Whether you're a frontline tech, endoscopy tech, OR nurse, or surgical services administrator, you undoubtedly have influence in medical device processing at your facility. In each episode, we speak with experts from the Healthmark Clinical Affairs team, industry leaders, or special guests from the trenches to answer your questions and bring you relevant industry information, equipping you for excellence in medical device processing. My name is Kevin Anderson, and I will be your host. Now let's get started. Hey everyone, welcome back to the Ask the Educator podcast. This is your host, Kevin Anderson. Joining me, I have co-host Adam Okada and our guest of honor, Marianne Drosnock. Dr. Drosnock is back, and we're continuing our series on ST91, and we are going to pick up with her and get to the monitoring of the manual cleaning process. So this is a really important step that I wanted to let Marianne give us some thoughts about this. So what does everyone out there need to know? What does ST91 have to say about monitoring that manual cleaning process? As we all know, it may or may not be effective, and that's what we're trying to get down to, right?
Yeah, absolutely, Kevin, and thank you for that introduction. I think it's really important to note that within the new ST91, we have really emphasized monitoring and quality for all steps of the process, including this section that we're talking about, which is the manual cleaning process. And as we've always recommended, there are steps in there, such as making sure you have the correct volume of water and detergent in the sink to have it properly diluted, monitoring the temperature of your chemicals. But further than that, really, how do you monitor that cleaning was effective? So what we have in there is a lot more information on doing a visual inspection with the unaided eye, doing an enhanced inspection, and we'll get into each of these more with a lighted magnification product, and then doing cleaning verification, and you may or may not also be doing borescope inspection of the internal surfaces. So it's really a combination of all of those steps that give us a snapshot on how we did with the cleaning process, which is so important because we know, due to whatever circumstances it might be or series of events that can happen, whether it be the scope sat too long or maybe simethicone was used during the procedure, but not all scopes get clean per the IFU cleaning steps the first time we try it. So we do have to have a way to show or demonstrate that we have effectively cleaned it before we go on to the further steps of either disinfection or sterilization. So really this emphasis on doing a good quality process throughout, and especially with the manual cleaning, because in the past we've really had no ways to monitor that. And that's why the standards are catching up to make these stronger recommendations and even requirements around inspection and cleaning verification.
You make a really good point about the manual cleaning and all the steps required, but I believe even those automated cleaning steps also require some kind of monitoring, right? If we're talking about automated dosing machine, that all of these things have requirements as far as monitoring those as well, right?
Yeah, you're right, Adam. And we do touch on that and emphasize that within ST91. And for automated, you can really think about it as, like you said, the dosing machines or a flushing pump that's used to automate some of those manual flushing with a syringe steps. Those are all devices that require preventative maintenance and might be daily flow verification or decontamination steps. So really emphasizing that you follow the instructions from that product manufacturer in its IFU to make sure you're doing everything for those devices to ensure that they're working properly, which helps you then to succeed in your manual cleaning or those automated steps in the cleaning process. But automated cleaning can go another step further. You could be talking about automated cleaning steps in an AER. So a lot of the AERs on the market today now have additional cleaning steps embedded into their cycle. So automated cleaning can also mean monitoring those steps of what is performed in the AER to ensure that that's happening. And you can do that through visualization. You can do that through flow verification. There are some products on the market for that, depending on the system that you have. So really what we want to focus on, like we've been used to with ST79 and our sterilization processes, that you have these engineered quality steps for each part of the process along the way. But historically, we haven't had that on the endoscope side of things. So what we really want to impart is if you have a piece of equipment or a step that's being done, how can you monitor and demonstrate that that is working appropriately and it's effective? So think about that as, okay, I'm doing the manual cleaning. What can I do to demonstrate that was accurate? Or I'm doing, steps in the AER. Well, I can do more than just my minimum effective concentration, my test strip on that. So at each step in the process, what can we do to ensure it's working?
Yeah, that's an excellent introduction, I think, to the monitoring of the manual cleaning process. For me, it helps when I kind of think of it as in parallel to what goes on in SPD. I know we test our cleaning equipment to make sure it's performing properly. And oftentimes, even on the assembly side, we might also do a residual soil test of some type, which kind of brings me to my next question. Like, what kind of options are there for people out there to monitor the cleaning process when it comes to cleaning verification specifically? We'll get to inspection as well, but when it comes to cleaning verification, what can they expect to find and possibly use for this critical step in the process?
Yeah, Kevin, I think that's a great question. I just wanted to start with a reminder of what the requirements are now for cleaning verification in the new ST91. So it's a shall, so a requirement of the
Hmm.
standard that all high-risk scopes be monitored with a cleaning verification test every time that it's processed. And for non-high-risk scopes, a statistically significant portion of those. And we talk through in ST91 how to figure out what that is. So if you're not doing anything for cleaning verification, you really should be doing something at this point based on what the standards say, and within AORN and SGNA have recommendations for it too. So it is something that it's time for everybody to get on board with, and especially if you're doing those high risk endoscopes like duodenoscopes, bronchoscopes, EUS, EBUS, ureteroscopes, cystoscopes, all of them are considered to be high risk. Now, as far as what you can use to do that, it's really a facilities-based decision to determine what works best for their facility. Within the standard, we'll never tell you that you have to use a certain product. That's an unfair advantage, right, for a manufacturing company. So we will tell you, we have to do something for this step, but it's up to your facility to do a risk assessment and think about your logistics and budget and all of that to figure out what works best in your specific set of circumstances. Now, talking about different types of products that are available on the market, the common ones that we see and most frequently used are combination test strips. They look at protein, carbohydrate, and hemoglobin together in one dipstick test. And then there's residual protein tests on their own, residual hemoglobin tests, and also ATP tests. Very commonly used, all of them. And again, up to your facility to decide what works best within your process. Look at space constraints, where you would do the testing. Does the scope have to be hung up, or do you have a counter to lay it down? So there's a lot of things to think about to help determine which product your facility may use.
Excellent. And that kind of brings me to my next point, which is on enhanced visual inspection. So we know that the scopes, we're seeing a lot of damage. We're seeing a lot of things that you can't see with the naked eye. If you look at it with this enhanced visual inspection, you can see a lot of this damage. Can you talk about the things that we've changed and then why those things were changed in the new document?
Yeah, you're right, Adam. It really has to do with the reports of damage that are coming in, and the studies that are being performed. So we have studies in peer-reviewed literature showing that damage happens more frequently and earlier on than we ever thought. And then we have reports that you can see and find in the MAUDE database that show facilities aren't catching these damaged scopes through doing a visual inspection. And then those scopes are being used on patients and causing harm to them, and sometimes very serious complications to the patients when damaged scopes are used on them. So we felt like there was enough data out there and published material that shows that we need to be doing a better job on inspecting these endoscopes. So the new ST91 does require a visual inspection on every endoscope after the manual cleaning process, before it goes on to disinfection or sterilization, to show, is it even in the state of repair that would allow it to be successfully disinfected or sterilized. At minimum, this has to be performed with the unaided eye, but so without any sort of magnification. But we have strong recommendations in there to add lighted magnification to do this external inspection step, because remember, these are black colored scopes and your soil is usually very dark to black in color. And so it's difficult to see. And then we don't always have great lighting in our endoscope processing areas. And you have age as a factor in there for how much magnification you need and lighting. So it is just a quality practice to add in. If you're doing the inspection already, why wouldn't you do it under lighted magnification? And there are a wide variety of products out there, anything from a very inexpensive handheld magnifier through swing arm ones or desktop ones or microscopes. So we don't tell you what kind, again, you have to use, but we do highly recommend a lighted magnification for doing that inspection step that's required anyway.
Well, isn't it true, Marianne, too, that there are even IFUs of common flexible endoscopes that require some sort of magnification during their inspection process? I know maybe it isn't in every single IFU, but I feel like there are some scopes that have this built right into the IFU. So we should already have this equipment available, right?
Yeah, you're right, Kevin. It is in some of the IFUs. And what we're seeing now as new scopes are brought out on the market, or older scopes, their IFUs are updated. We see new requirements in the IFUs for doing these inspection steps, where to focus, what to look for, at what stage in the process, not only after manual cleaning, where we're kind of used to doing it anyway, but really emphasizing in the procedure room before reuse on the patient, again, because the scope could be damaged during disinfection, it could be damaged during sterilization, and you wouldn't catch that, and then that would be used on the patient. So also emphasizing inspection in the procedure room right before the procedure itself.
And then I did want to kind of clear things up. In the last episode, we were talking with John about kind of a misconception about the drying cabinets and what's minimum standard and what's preferred. Is there also some language in there about a borescope and whether or not we should be using one? And can you speak a little bit to what that language says? Does everybody have to go out and buy borescopes for their endoscopes?
Right, Adam. And that's a great question. The committee did stop short of requiring a borescope because, again, it's a financial constraint, and there were feelings that maybe there was not enough data to support having to make it a requirement. But there is data out there that supports making it a recommendation. So that's where we landed with the standard, is that consider using a borescope, and that aligns with what AORN says in their guidelines, and it's something you would want to have on hand. We do have recommendations also in there to inspect with a borescope internally if an endoscope repeatedly fails cleaning verification, or if the physician noted something weird happened during the procedure, something didn't feel right, or during the cleaning steps, if there was a restriction felt when passing a cleaning brush, like it just didn't feel right to the person performing cleaning, then we do also have recommendations in there to inspect the scope during those circumstances. And also, it's recommended to inspect internally with a borescope when you get new scopes in, and before and after they come back in for repair. So with all those steps of where we recommend that it could be used, I think it's pretty strong as far as that recommendation goes to have one and to utilize it. But again, we stopped short of making that a shall.
Yeah, great point in terms of, is it a must-have or not, or shall? That's always very important to consider. I feel like as somebody who's had the opportunity to use a borescope on a lot of these flexible endoscopes, I'd be remiss if I thought it would be a good idea to go without the borescope. Hopefully, these changes in the standards and recommendations, even the recommendation being strong enough to help you justify that purchase, because I do think it will go a long way in increasing your quality in your process. But speaking of quality, we have some other things we need to monitor as well when it comes to making sure our cleaning process is effective. And I think our new document has addressed this. What do we need to know about water quality and our chemistries and all of that when it comes to probably, I would guess, both manual and for AERs as well?
Yeah, Kevin, and you're going to see a lot more emphasis on water quality in the upcoming years. We know that Amy is working on taking their water quality TIR and making that a full standard. So what used to be TIR 34 will become a full standard. So we will see a lot more emphasis on what's expected for water quality in your device reprocessing areas, including endoscopy. But because that TIR was not available yet as a standard when we published ST91, we did put additional wording in there, but expect that there's more to come with the new standard. So what ST91 basically says is that we want to emphasize that you should have the best quality of water coming into your endoscope processing areas to allow those high quality processes to be successful. So we have in there strong recommendations to monitor and control the water supply that comes into both your endoscope processing sinks, so where you do the cleaning and the rinsing and the leak testing, all of that, but also to any equipment like your AERs. And you want to make sure you have the best quality water going into those as your facility can have, basically, and that you need to control that. And you do that through periodic monitoring and testing of the water. And you can't assume that facilities is just taking care of everything. They may do an annual test or whatever the local municipality tells them they have to do, but we really need to control that more at the local level, meaning at the department level. So what we're really looking for is basic tests that can easily be performed by the staff within the department, looking at testing your water coming out of your sinks for things like pH, hardness, alkalinity. The same with water going into your AERs, is that of the same high quality. Then the additional recommendation in there that's brand new in the US is to periodically monitor the final rinse water in your AERs. So there have been documented reports of contamination and biofilm building up in these AERs for whatever reason it may be. Things like, not doing decontamination cycles in them or waterline disinfection cycles, when the filters are changed and we open them up to the air and they can become contaminated inside. So basically not following the preventative maintenance on them and filter changes and waterline disinfect, you can get this buildup of pathogenic organisms within the piping and the basins of these AERs. And then you're contaminating all your endoscopes. So elsewhere in the world, pretty much, mostly everywhere except the US, they do monitor their AERs monthly by taking a sample of the final rinse water in that AER, sending it to a microbiology lab where they filter it and then grow it out and see if there's any bacterial contamination in those AERs. So we didn't assign a frequency to that, but we do have a recommendation to periodically monitor that final rinse water quality to make sure that it's not going to contribute to disinfection failures, which it can, and we know does happen. So that's an important one to think about, how you would start building that into your quality testing and work with your internal micro lab to figure out how they would take those samples, or how you would take those samples and how the lab would then proceed with processing them. So lots to think about behind the scenes on how to do that. But there are good documents from around the world that can help facilities figure that out.
Awesome. And we're running a little bit low on time, so I'm going to give you a couple of quick fire questions to kind of just talk about very briefly. Keeping the valves together with the endoscope, is that something that's recommended in the standard?
Yep, continues to be a recommendation in ST91. I know with the first edition, we had a lot of pushback on that, but we did decide to keep it in there with more options on and examples of ways that facilities can comply with that. So it's not so like you can only do it this one way anymore, but we do need to keep it traceable to the procedure and therefore the patient. So we have some other examples of how you may do that.
All right, excellent. Next one is going to be on proper documentation and quality assurance parameters. Can you just speak kind of briefly about the proper documentation?
Sure. Document, right? Oh, yeah,
Absolutely.
we do. We do have When we want something documented or a log kept, we do have that noted in the standard. Sometimes it just says, document and convey that information. Sometimes it says have a written log that is kept for that. But basically, making sure all IFUs are followed for all the scopes and all equipment used, making sure we're following those quality control parameters, verifying and monitoring personnel performance, competency, work practices, adhering to your internal policies and procedures, making sure you have a group of people that act as your multidisciplinary team, and that you have a comprehensive written quality control plan and safety plan for all aspects of endoscope processing. And we have that all within ST91 of what should be included in that quality assurance and safety program, and what should be documented at each step along the way. So it's really about diving into ST91 and digesting that and following those details at each step. Here's what you need to document. Here's your quality control parameters. Here's what you should be looking at for training and competency, all in there.
Yeah, and I really appreciate that ST91, this new version, doesn't just tell you, here's the standard, here's what you should be doing. It gives a lot of rationale and a lot of background studies, things like that, about the reason behind all of those things. And again, we're just kind of discussing an overview of ST91. There's going to be, we talked about this. We could probably do an entire episode just on the documentation steps and things like that are required. But you do really need to go back to that actual document and look at it and make sure you understand. And this is a great help. I think Marianne is breaking it down in a way that's very easy to understand. But you really do need to go to the document and look for yourself to see what's there. There's one thing that is my personal favorite part of ST91, which is the certifications of technicians for performing the reprocessing steps. Can you talk a little bit about what language is there in the document for that?
Yeah, we have a section on personnel training and certification, which covers the formal training and competency within the department, and also an external certification program. So we did make it a requirement, so a shall, that all personnel complete formal training and have competency verification performed for them in all aspects of endoscope processing. So all different types of endoscopes, different configurations of channels, the different AERs that could be used, all steps in the process prior to ever performing any processing of that scope by themselves. So prior to that first assignment, they need to do all the training and be signed off on their competency. I thought that's really important to make that a shall. And then as far as certification goes, we do have that as a recommendation, a should, that all personnel who are processing, doing any steps in the process, should be certified within 2 years of employment, and also continue to maintain that certification throughout their employment. So anybody touching an endoscope as far as processing goes really does need to have that certification. But again, stopped short of making that a requirement. However, we're seeing more and more states migrate to making their own laws about requiring certification. So of course you would follow your state laws in addition to this recommendation. And then in ST91, we give examples of what might be the certification programs that a technician or anyone processing endoscopes would go through and complete. Examples being HSPA or CBSPD. They both have endoscope processing certifications that give the credentials, that designation as an endoscope processing technician would get. And then you also have a certification or a program through SGNA, but that does not convey any credentials. It's online modular type program. So we do strongly recommend certification. We know it demonstrates a minimum level of knowledge related to all those aspects of endoscope processing. And it really should be written into job descriptions, is what we say is a recommendation, so that your employer would write that in as a requirement before anybody even takes a new job in endoscope processing.
Excellent. Yeah. So the thing with certification for people out there to realize, a lot of different folks do endoscope reprocessing. I know we had a lot of registered nurses. So no matter what your title is or your background, there is a certifying body out there for you. Marianne just listed them all. So definitely encourage that. One thing I want to plug shamelessly before we finalize this episode is that if you're not taking advantage of Healthmark's SPD Dollars program, it's a rewards program, you got to get started on that, because I can't tell you how many certification textbooks I bought using that program back when I was a customer. So get started with that. Reach out to your sales rep for that. And Marianne, thanks again. And also, Adam, thank you. This has been a great series, and hopefully it gets people pointed in the right direction. Obviously, we want you to get your copy of ST91 as well, but wanted to help you along the way.
Great. Thanks, Kevin. Thanks, Adam.
All opinions expressed on this show are those of the presenters. Before using any medical device, it is important to review the device manufacturer's instructions for use.